was letting folks know that I think Jonathan will probably not be joining us. He said he would try to, but he is on vacation and he's taking his family on an RV trip from here to Michigan, which sounds fascinating to me. So hopefully we'll get some stories when he gets back, stopping along the way at farms and wineries and different places. So he will likely not be here. So let's go ahead and call the meeting to order right now at 7:02. And let's go ahead and let me try our new format here. See how this goes. It looked like folks were able to get in there. Let me adjust my screen. All right, great. All right, so for everyone else out there in public viewing the meeting, we're trying a new format tonight. In the past, we have been kind of showing the board packet, and it has a lot of details in it. It's still publicly available to everybody, but we thought that this might be a little bit of a cleaner and just easier way for board members to present information. We're hoping that it's just as thorough, but we're going to try it on for size and see how it works. So we'll be using this Google slide deck essentially to guide us through the meeting. The other advantage of this is that since it's shareable for the board, that folks are able to kind of go in and update at their own pace and even do things if it becomes important last minute to go ahead and update that. But we're just hoping that this is just a better medium for everyone to get data. And then for those who want to dig in more, like I said, that packet is still available with the official reports. So here's what we have for tonight is our typical agenda: opening comments, opening items, public comment. We'll do the consent agenda, PTCC report, all the committee reports and ED report. We do have some old business tonight. And then we do have an executive session to discuss some personnel matters, and then we will close out for the evening. So let's go ahead and start with the vision and mission and then core values. My assignments that I tried to do last time didn't work, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to ask people to come off of mute and try to just opportunistically jump in here and read some of these. So I'll start with the vision, and Christy, if you would do the mission, and then we'll switch over and let board members do the core values and our crest. So our vision is to develop globally minded citizens who have the knowledge, skills, and attributes to affect positive change in our world.
The Globe Academy fosters global learning opportunities through balanced education for children of all backgrounds, with a focus on dual language immersion, an experiential learning model, and a constructivist approach. Globe inspires students to be high-performing, lifelong learners equipped to make a positive impact in the world.
Awesome.
Core values. The Globe Academy's core values are expressed in the acronym CREST: community, respect, empathy, sustainability, and trust. These values are expected of the governing board, faculty, staff, parents, and students. They're woven into daily life at Globe and incorporated into the curriculum.
Community. We are inclusive and we nurture and support one another.
Respect. We treat ourselves and others with each other with kindness and dignity. I think we got a typo there. I would pick the one with the typo.
Checking you there.
We treat ourselves and others with kindness and dignity. I feel like we're missing a phrase there.
Empathy. We strive to understand and share the feelings of others.
Sustainability. We aim to conserve our resources for optimal use in the present and future.
Trust. We are committed to honesty, transparency, and respectfully sharing our thoughts and encouraging others to do the same.
Thank you, everyone. All right, copy editing. I'm not going to tell you what time of the evening I was doing this, so no excuses. No excuses. All right. Thank you, everyone. All right. Now we are going to move on to public comment, and I had only received one request from Amberly Toole. So if Amberly is with us, who's?
Amberly, will you take yourself on mute and just say something?
I think I did.
Okay, great. We can hear you. Go for it.
Hi again, I'm Amberly Toole, and I have one child at Globe currently on the first grade Spanish track. Just as some background, and so my public comment tonight is just about the technology issues that we've been having. And so I'm not sure if you guys are aware of all the difficulties with the school issued iPads. That's what we're using because she's in first grade. But just to list some of them, like we're not able to access the classes directly from the camera in Google Meet. As a first grader, she cannot log on to her classes or her assignments by herself because we have to use a lot of workarounds. And every day the assignments are uploaded that day, so we don't have any previous time or knowledge of what we need, what is not working. And specifically, my child cannot log on to a lot of her connections classes almost every day because of some type of technology issue, saying she doesn't have the credentials to get in the classes or they're unavailable to her. And so every week there's just something different, and she's not able to do her schoolwork at the time that it's assigned or when the class is being facilitated. And so with that being said, we got a newsletter sent to us, and it said that absences and tardies due to, in quotes, technological difficulties, end quote, are still absences and tardies. An email to the front office staff CCing school administration explaining the trouble may, in quotes again, excuse the absence or tardy, but not remove it. And so I just had a few questions surrounding that, and it's really what's meant by these things may be excused and because they're out of our control as far as technology is concerned, and then why are students, for a lack of a better word, being penalized provided that the technology we received is subpar. Next is what systems are in place to help students that are having technological difficulties, and is there a system or a plan in place for students who teachers realize are falling behind? Because I know we are personally spending time on the weekends trying to catch up on assignments because we're not able to do them in the time we're trying to wait for them to be fixed. And I just know that I am not alone, as we've seen on Facebook, the Facebook groups for our class and the main Globe page, that other people are having issues with this. But I just want to make sure that, like, my child doesn't fall behind, other children don't fall behind, and we're not, so to say, being penalized because they can't access these items due to circumstances outside of their control. Because even sometimes if the iPad's functioning correctly, the infrastructure for internet all over the city isn't able to handle the uptick in usage. So we're having issues where that runs. And I just didn't know if you guys were aware of these issues, and then how are they being handled, because it's the thing with they may be excused or not. And I know for my child, she's never missed a day of school since she started school in pre-K. And I don't want this to be something that kind of falls back on her. Like, cross our fingers, we've had great health and she's been able to come to school, but I don't want it to affect her education or seemingly that she has an uptick in absences due to technology. And that was all.
Okay, thank you, Amberly, for the feedback and for sharing that. I think I'd like to just say this after, at every meeting, is that it's our policy to not respond in the meeting. We like to take the opportunity to do some investigation and then get a response either directly to the person making comment or have a presentation or something that addresses feedback in a larger way through the board. So thank you for that. I appreciate that, and we will take a look. All right, let's move on to our consent agenda. Is there any adjustments to the agenda or to the meeting minutes that were in your packet? Scanning for head nods. All right, hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. All right, and we will go to the PTCC report. Who do we have tonight? Is Michelle or
Laura, is it you?
over here?
It's me. Can you guys hear me?
We
Yes.
can. Great.
Hi.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Laura.
I was writing in the comments, so let me delete that back out.
No worries.
Okay, so we still have some open positions. We're still looking for co-chairs for fundraising and for GAP. Hopefully soon we'll have some leads. These are for co-leads. So we do have one person in each of these positions, but it would be really nice to kind of take some of that load off. We prefer to have two people working together on this, just because, you know, everybody's busy and it can get to be a lot of work. We are also looking for a co-lead for our Spirit Night team as well. Our budget, we have almost finalized it, and I think we told you at our last meeting that we were working on it and we were finalizing it. And we were actually supposed to vote on that as a PTCC leadership team tonight, but we had to postpone our meeting since you guys were meeting tonight. So we're now voting on that on Wednesday night, I believe, and then it will go out to the school for a comment and for voting by the school, by parents and teachers. So you should see that very soon now. Very excited about the PTCC speaker series. Drew Reynolds, thank you very much for doing this. He will be speaking on September 28th on practical tips for supporting your child in dual language online learning. Very much looking forward to that. And that will be at 8:30. I didn't put the time here. So 8:30 next Monday, I believe. And in October, our counselors will be talking about social and emotional challenges with COVID and with virtual learning. And then we talked to Sandra today, and she will be talking about how to go about learning different languages, and well, we're doing this virtually, and she will be speaking in November. The Upper Campus scoreboard has been ordered, so we're really hoping to see that soon. It took us a little while to get the graphics together, but Katris has already approved that. The Lower Campus Teachers Lounge, we're really pushing hard to get that together, especially now that there's rumblings among the county of going back to school. So we're going to start pushing that contractor, and that we absolutely have to have this before our teachers come back, because they are going to need it for putting up with our kids virtually. International Fest. We have started talking about International Fest and started planning it. This is going to be virtual this year. Right now, we're thinking we're going to do themed days, and we're going to start asking parents to send us a 30 to 45-second little video or pictures, or maybe a very short story about their experiences with maybe cooking or recipes that are international, family, ancestry, music, or travel and fun vacations that they've had. So look for more information on that. Upcoming events. Tomorrow night, we are having a Spirit Night at Hopsticks. So this will be our first, maybe takeout or virtual Spirit Night. So, you know, you can go online to Hopsticks. I think it's hopsticks.com, and place your order. It's a fabulous restaurant. It is Globe parent owned. And just in the comments section, say that you are part of the Globe Academy, and a portion of their proceeds from tomorrow night will come back to our school. And they're in Chamblee, so somewhat, if you will, central for many of us. We are going to try to look for restaurants around the county, and we are going to try to focus on Globe parent-owned different stores, maybe not all of them restaurants, but we're trying to work that out. So absolutely looking for suggestions. Upper Campus Book Fair is going to be September 28th through October 2nd, and more information will be coming out about that in the weekly reminder. Next Spirit Night will be Matthew's Cafeteria, and it will be in October. I believe it's October 19th. And then I talked a little bit about International Fest. We have loose dates of October 12th through the 16th, and I'm sorry, there's an error there, but we are pending Christie's approval on that. So once we get Christie's approval and the school's approval, again, we're gonna start announcing that and looking for volunteers and looking for those videos.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. Yeah, it's exciting to see our very own Drew Reynolds speaking. I need to make sure I make it to that one for sure. And I think last time at Hopsticks is pretty great. And
How do we attend the meetings? There's a link somewhere that it gets sent out, or you have to go to the website, or?
There will be a Zoom meeting link that will be in the weekly reminder, so look for that.
Thank you.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Drew. Appreciate that. Thank you, Laura.
Sure thing.
Right. Let's go ahead, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff Laura talked about here.
I know, I was like, Laura, thanks for that, that intro.
Nice.
The rumblings of reopening. So that was a long DeKalb board meeting. I don't know if anybody else attended or sat through the whole thing, but I did, and it was long and a little painful. But here is just a summary of what I took away from that meeting. So DeKalb has come up with 5 phases. We're in phase 1 right now, which means we're all virtual. DeKalb County School District will begin phase 2 only after we have reached between under 6 to 100 cases for a 14-day period per 100,000 people. And I think there was a lot of rumblings about that at the DeKalb board meeting, wanting clarification. What does this mean? What does this mean? I think it was Stan Juster who made the comment, said, okay, for 13 days, if we are under that 100 per 100,000 people, and on day 14, we pop back up, and the superintendent was like, we start over. So that is where they are now. Now, with that said, at the end of all of this, there was the tagline that that this can change at any moment, but this is their plan as of right now. Right now, DeKalb is at 122 per 100,000 people. That was of this morning. I did hear someone texted me and said that it had jumped back up, but today is 2 weeks exactly from Labor Day weekend. So that could be the reason why. So once DeKalb reaches the end of the 14-day period of under 100 cases per 100,000 people, there will be 2 weeks to get ready for students to be in the building 1 day a week. That is their phase 2. So, and phase 3 is them coming in the building 1 day a week. Phase 4 is a hybrid approach, which is 2 days, everybody's off on Wednesdays, 2 days virtual, and they flip with half their class. And then phase 5 is everybody back in the building with an online option, virtual option. So that is DeKalb's plan. So I know that the big wondering right now is, well, what are we going to do? So we're going to figure that out. So we have created a Globes reopening committee and like an advisory committee that is really going to use all of their expertise to help us come up with that operational plan to implement. So I want to say thank you to all the parents out there. Thank you so much for putting your name forward. We had over 46 parents submit their name to volunteer. Over 27 of those serve as a physician in epidemiology and or infectious disease. I was blown away of how many we have in our community, and it was just fabulous. So thank you all for willing to donate your time to help us and advise us with your expertise. So we did choose 4 parents. It was important to us to, oh, hold on, go back. Please, thank you. It was important to us to choose those 4 parents that have the spread over our county. So we have representatives from the north, the central, and the south of DeKalb, and with varying professional backgrounds related to reopening our schools. So that's kind of how we came to it. So here is our advisory committee on reopening. Okay, so our board representatives are Katie and Drew. I did not put your expertise on here, so I'm going to let you kind of share what you do in just a minute, but it's Katie Monroe, Drew Reynolds. Anita Patel is no longer on the board as of what, 3 months ago, 2 months ago, something like that. But we knew we still wanted her to be a part of this reopening committee because she does work for the CDC and she's the senior advisor for pandemic planning and response. How awesome is that? So, and then myself. So Katie, you want to give just a little bit about why you volunteered from the board to be on this committee?
Sure. So I'm an anesthesiologist assistant. I've been working in the operating room in the kinds of procedures that are considered very high risk. So I've had a lot with just exposure in that way. And then I also work as a program director of one of the health professions programs at Emory and have been on involved with all of the Emory University and School of Medicine conversations about reopening. I had to create a plan for reopening of our students in the suite and how we would do that. And we had to have approval from our infectious disease experts all the way up through the provost office. So I've just been around it for many months now.
Thank you. And Drew?
So I work in the nonprofit sector. I'm a program director at Child Spring International. We do surgeries worldwide, but it's not the medicine side that I bring to this, but really more of the academic side. As a member of the academic committee and a former high school teacher and social worker, I'm doing a lot of work in schools. And so really trying to think through the questions about how this plays out and how that's going to affect student learning and how we can best support teachers and students in their learning through the transition.
Awesome, thank you. And the staff members, we knew we wanted some from each campus and then a staff member that also goes between campuses. So we have Jana Burrow, Maggie Sherwood, Kristen Rogers, Tremaine Quarterman, and Megan Tolbert who are going to serve on that committee. Our 4 parents, Nicole Peoples, she is a physician. She has been creating safety measures in a clinical setting and getting through this time in her office. Yvonne Castaneda has been a team lead for opening her school at the end of August. So we knew that'd be important to have somebody who's kind of gone through that. Then we have Laura I always ruin this name and I apologize, Laura. Lauren Gurkowski, who's an epidemiologist and serves on CDC's team that developing the guidance for schools. So that's exciting. Also Lauren Christensen Lindquist. She's an epidemiologist and assistant professor at Emory University and on that operations planning team with bringing people back into the building. So I feel really good that we're going to have some great expertise as we start looking at DeKalb's plan and what's right for Globe and how we move forward in this time. So again, just I can't thank everybody enough, from board to staff to parents. We got more people volunteering for each section than we had room for. So it's wonderful. So thank you. And our first meeting is tomorrow night. So we're gonna start digging in tomorrow night. So thank you. All right.
Before you move on, I just wanted to let folks know that you should see, and if I'm sure you previewed the packet and saw that in new business, we are going to talk about kind of formalizing the committee. We passed the new bylaws, we're kind of getting used to them. And so as we were looking through those, we have a couple of options for that. So we'll have some discussion and, recommendations on what that looks like. I've talked to Drew and Katie and Christy all kind of separately about it. And so just letting folks know that we've been planning this, and this is all fits within the constructs of our board oversight per the bylaws, and we'll discuss that in new business. All right, thanks. All right, you ready, Christy?
Yes, thank you, Ryan. The next thing is we're looking at our enrollment data. So we are going to, even though it's the end of September, we're just looking at August because I want you to be able to see the whole month all together. So this gives you the month of August. And so you can see down at the bottom where it says total on the right-hand side, we had 5 students come in and 10 students leave. And so if you look by grade level, you can see kindergarten and first grade, we are able to go ahead and fill those seats from our wait list. Same with 6th grade, even though we haven't had any movement in 6th grade, which is, I just want to point out that's unusual. Oh, yeah, thank you. So that is unusual. Yeah, no, that's good. You can see it better. Thank you. I appreciate it. I tried to get it to fit on one page. I was like, I can do this. I can make it work. So you can see that there. We do, we have exhausted our wait list in 3rd grade and 4th grade. 3rd grade Spanish is the only one that we have a wait list for there. And so that's where we are as far as enrollment, with our total sitting at, for the month of August, 1074. And then if we could go to the next slide. All right, so I said before I would bring about our exit survey. So our exit survey, this data came from starting in July 14th, because that's where we left off on data from the last time we talked about it, through September 17th. There was a total of 39 students who withdrew from, but 17 of those were coded as no-shows. So those were students who were never really students of ours. They came off the wait list, but then didn't accept, they accepted their spot, but then they didn't show up. So they were never truly students of ours. So just, I wanted to make that's important. So survey sent out was a total of 22. We got 12 returned. So our percentage rate is sitting at about 55%. So that's where we are. The next section, the next outline section with the highlighted yellow, this is the questions that we ask. And the highlighted yellow you'll see is where we're sitting at average per what we received back. So we have quality of communication, teacher attention, teacher teaching experience, learning environment, parent opportunity to participate, responsiveness of teachers and admin, student achievement level, school safety, and behavior management. So you can kind of see where responsiveness of teachers and admin, and I think we talked about this before, and I think Monique brought it up, which was a great point, is we really need to separate that out for the next one we get out, because it would be good to know just for our information, whether it's teachers and admin, or teachers or admin. So I think we're going to separate those two just so we can have some better data. And student achievement level. So those two were our lowest ones at 2, and our highest ones were school safety and parents' opportunity to participate in the school. Just another point of information that I think this is important for you guys is at the end, we do ask people that if they feel comfortable to please leave their name and their email address or phone number so we can contact them. And I would say about, I didn't put the exact numbers on here, so I apologize, but it's between 30 to 40% that do give us the opportunity. And then we ask them if they would like to be contacted by a board member or an administrator. So just so you know that there is some follow-up if they would like some follow-up, or to give us more additional feedback. So based on the reasons leaving for these 12 surveys that were returned, 1 was leaving for a magnet program, 4 were leaving the area, 1 going to a private school, and they did note on that they were going to a private school so they could have in-person learning. So I think that's important for us to know, you know, that's why they went to a private school. 3 for academics did not meet my expectations, and 3 for complaints not addressed. So, and what we as an admin team, we look at that and we try to see, is there anything that we already know about? Is there anything we need to find out further? So this is really good information for us to have so we can, you know, celebrate the good and also learn from the constructive feedback that we get. So any questions about the exit survey?
Can I just ask one real quick, Christy?
Sure.
Just curious about, when you look at the data here, kind of what would you think is a next step that you would want to take this year to kind of in light of what you found out?
I'm always intrigued. Well, is there intrigued the right word? I'm always intrigued with the section on student achievement level, and the 3 that said the reason why they left was academics did not meet my expectations. And I try to dig in that and to see if there's any other responses. If it is, it's interesting to me because it's pretty much along the spectrum, because I always wonder, is it the students who tend to be on the high end of that spectrum and not getting what they need or push, or is it students that really, really struggle and they're not getting what they need, or is it somewhere in the middle? And it's interesting that there's some touch points all along that spectrum. And so really wanting to dig more into that. And then of course, always responsiveness of teachers and admin and getting information that they need.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Christy, real quick, could you refresh my memory on what, do you remember what the answers are for 1, 2, 3, and 4? Is this a disagree, strongly disagree type Likert scale?
Yes, it is. I should have put that on there. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, 5 is I strongly agree. 1 is I strongly disagree,
Okay.
and then meet in the middle. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Christy, was there a breakdown of, were the 22 kids pretty well spread out among the demographics of the rest of the school? Or was there kind of one population that was the bigger group of the 22, or was it just not enough people to look at that also?
I would say it really wasn't enough, but there wasn't one group that stood out.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if there, when we start to compile the data, because I would love to look at this, look at our next section in another couple of months to see if it differs from this, but then to combine the two to look at a whole, and maybe then we will see maybe a trend or maybe not.
Yeah, I may have enough data over a couple years to figure out, hey, this specific group of boys is not making it out of here, or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
I do.
Ryan, before you, okay, go ahead.
Kind of following along Chip's question, which was going to be mine. So you're saying like of the 22, so of the 12 people who returned, or 12 families that returned surveys, we can't see if that number is overwhelmingly one demographic. Was that information captured, or is it, were we asking those questions to figure out if it was a particular demographic, or a particular language track, or a particular age group? Anything like that? Are we capturing it?
We are asking about language track. We are not asking child's demographic.
Okay, so we wouldn't even over time be able to see if, say, for instance, people who are from Southwest DeKalb are leaving versus individuals who are in the Lakeside area, or
we would know some of that information if they are the parents who left their name and phone number or email. We would know that information because we can still look at an Infinite Campus.
So are we doing that? Like for the ones that we are able to gather their demographics, are we able to, are we actually quantifying that? Are we putting it with the information that we do have in Infinite Campus, or is that something we're just not capturing at this point?
No, we do not. I mean, we know when we sit and look at the names, we as, you know, the leadership team know, but we are not adding a column and doing that. But I do think it's a great idea to do that.
Yeah, I would suggest that we discuss at least doing that, because I think kind of what Chip is saying, I think kind of what like Chip is saying, oh, well, maybe over time we'll have more of that information. But in reality, if we're not capturing it over time, we won't have more of that information because we're not capturing it. And so if we have, I see a comment come up, but if we have the opportunity to gather that information or do something with even the unenrollment numbers when people are unenrolling to be able to see what those demographics are looking like, and making sure that we're doing, being mindful of, hey, you know, it may be a bunch of kids who are on free or reduced lunch that are leaving, or this may be a bunch of kids in a certain demographic, especially if it's all coming from a certain language track or things along those lines. So I don't know what team we would need to get together to make sure that we're documenting that, maybe even in the separately from the survey with the unenrollment data that you just gave us in the last one, with those numbers, understanding that, but we would put it together with the people's certain complaints. And if we're having individuals say, oh, I'm having responsiveness issues, but they seem to be responsive issues from this demographic, then we can see if there are some underlying issues.
No, I totally agree. And we don't even have to discuss it. We can just do it.
Yeah. Okay.
We can pull that information.
I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to clarify though, we can pull withdrawal data. Like we know which families are withdrawing and we have their Infinite Campus data. So when you think of the families that have left and the students that have withdrawn, we know their language track, we know their teacher, their aide, we know all of that stuff. I think the question is matching it to the survey if we want to do that. So we do have that data and Christy does track that. And I think we did the last time we showed the survey, we showed which grades and which language track to look for some trends. And I think the question is mapping it to the survey responses. And the only thing that might make that difficult is that the more precise you get when you ask people about themselves, the less anonymous it feels. And so, you know, if we are, you know, soliciting feedback that we want it to be open and honest, somebody may not give us that if they feel like, oh, well, they know who I am and I don't feel comfortable saying this or putting my name on there. So it's a balance, I think.
I think you have two different issues. So you do have that, and I totally understand.
The other part of it too is that
Monique's not done talking. Hold on a second.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I do understand the anonymity part of that, but then actually making sure that we're reporting out on the demographics part, just withdrawals, doesn't seem like it would be something that would be problematic. So I guess we do have language tracks and things like that, but then there are other demographics that would be particularly interesting to just make sure that we're gathering that. But I also understand the anonymity request. All right.
No, agreed. Definitely on the reporting. Well,
absolutely, and our registrar does a really good job of that too. Tamiko does a great job keeping up with that.
Yep.
Yeah, so that'll be easy.
I do think we have to be a little bit I think the more data we have, the better. But we have to be a little bit careful because if out of all of that, 3 or 6 total left for what you would call bad reasons and filled out a response, you could skew the data really badly if you're looking at like 0.5% of the overall student population. So I think it's really good to keep all that data and see if there's certain trends, but you get one family that leaves and that's 3 angry kids that are, not that my 3 angry kids are leaving, but that's 3 angry kids that you know the demographics of that could skew the perspective that you're trying to find with that. So I think more data is always better. I would just say we got to be careful how we look at that and how much we really like dive into something that is less than 0.5% or 0.1%.
And we've had experience doing that before when we were reporting out numbers. And I most recently recall that with disciplinary numbers, and we're like, but look, it was only like 1 suspension the whole school year. And so it just so happened to be this demographic. And so it looks like 100% of our suspensions are this demographic. And it becomes, you know, a talking point for folks on both sides. And I just hope that, we just have to be educated and reasonable enough to understand that. I don't think we shy away from the fact that it's 100% of our, our numbers happen to be this demographic, but we have to come prepared to explain what that means and give the bigger picture. But, I think standing before the commission when we were trying to renew our charter, in saying things like, oh, well, look, our overall numbers are low. And so, we're happy with this, understanding that our charge is still, they're low, but this is the percentage. So if you're going to suspend one person, then we need to make sure that that's not that there's still not an issue there. So I get what we're saying here, but it's still, we don't shy away from reporting out because it looks skewed or can be skewed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions here?
Hey, don't go to the next slide yet. Are we good with this? Any other questions? Okay, great. So our next slide, before you go there, we have a very special announcement. I'm very excited about this. And this is our lower campus head of school, Miss Katia Blunt, has had something very exciting happen in her life. So let's go to the next slide. We have a baby. So Katia was so excited that she has adopted a little baby girl. Her name is Celeste Marcella Louise Blunt. After one of her names is after her grandmother, but she's going to be called lovingly Cella Lou. So she was born September 16th at 11:35 with 6.15 pounds. And if you're still over there, Katia, I'm going to move you over here really quick. If you would like to say anything. Did that work? Katia, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I have like a whole entourage. Hello, everyone. This is Cella Lou, and she can't wait to get back to Atlanta to meet everyone in person. And I am here with my mom and my dad and the birth mother and my two friends who drove in from Austin, Texas to meet the baby. So we look forward to having all of you as part of our lives too.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Katia.
Congrats. Congrats.
Beautiful.
Congrats.
Thank you. I'm going to pinch you, Christy. You put me on the spot.
Yeah, I didn't even think you would be here after this. Why don't you can sign off?
Okay, we've been watching. Okay.
Bye,
Bye,
Katia. We're all super excited for
That's
her
sweet.
and that little baby. I know, we are just, she's precious.
Awesome.
And that concludes my report. I'm sorry I went long tonight. We had a lot of good stuff to talk about.
Yeah, important stuff. All right, any final questions from Christy? I realized after the first two sections, we didn't pause for questions, and I would like to get in the habit of doing that. I don't want to just run through it. So is there anything from Christy's report that anybody wanted to ask that they didn't get to? Going once, going twice, scanning my 4 little windows.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Drew, can you follow up a new baby? I mean, you have a new baby too, but all right, go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, we have, I love pictures of babies. It's so great. That's wonderful news for Katia. So thank you for sharing that, Christy and Katia, if you're still, well, I guess you're off now, but thank you. So for academic committee, we just have a couple of quick updates. In our last meeting that we had earlier this month, we first spoke a little bit about talking about using data to share Globe Story. We use a lot of it for reporting and for our purposes for the board, but also what are some data points that we want to use to help share and communicate kind of who we are and what we do more publicly. And this was brought about as a conversation I was having with Megan as well about things that we can use for more public facing materials. And so we do have some existing data which are available on the governance website that everybody can see. And it's good to use that because it's, somebody can look at something that we see and that we present about ourselves and validate that in another place. But we also are looking at new areas for data collection that help kind of tell a little bit more about our DLI mission. And so moving beyond kind of test scores and your traditional education metrics to say, what can we say about the number of languages spoken at our school, the diverse backgrounds of our students and teachers and things like that, both culturally and linguistically. So also as a point here, I know Ryan brought up a really great point in this meeting that there's a really good opportunity for cross-committee collaboration. I kind of went at this backwards. Usually when I'm thinking about this and I'm not in my own committee or trying to think about what somebody needs for the immediate moment, you think, let's see what are those 3 or 4 or 5 talking points that we want to share about Globe from a messaging perspective, and then kind of find the data points that would most appropriately match or tell that story. And so here's where I think there's an opportunity for some cross-committee collaboration, perhaps over the next year, whether it's with communications or development or some of the other committees. I think you could also shed light on this as well, to identify what those types of things are. And I know this also finds it with our strategic plan too. So there's a lot of different ways that we could look at it. So I just am saying that we had a good conversation about it. I shared some things with Megan to get us started for the near term. But that as other committees see this work as important, we can kind of collaborate on ideas for what those 3, 4, or 5 kind of main messaging points are. And then academic committee, we might be able to help find some data points that could support those and help communicate that on our website, on things we hand out. When we are board members and people ask us about our work, or when teachers and staff are asked about their work at Globe, what can they kind of immediately kind of come to and to say that it's unique and interesting about Globe. So I'll pause actually after that point and ask if there's any questions or comments on what I just shared, given that it could relate to other people's work in committees. So I'll keep going, but as a next step for this, I think it's just something to kind of keep going. I might send out some emails to a few afterwards to see if this is something we want to take on this year. I know that there's like a zillion things going on right now too. So I want to make sure that we make sure that it's the right time and place to initiate this conversation. But we were able to get some good pieces out there for what we need for the near term. Secondly, in our meeting earlier this month, we spoke about academic factors to consider in school reopening. And this was really focusing not so much on the health considerations or cleaning and the sort of other factors that are really more of a health question or safety question. This is really more focused on what are the unique challenges that Globe would experience, or the neat opportunities that Globe might have when it comes to transitioning from a fully online model to either a hybrid or a traditional model. And the goal of this conversation was also helpful very much for me, because we have a number of staff on the committee, to bring into conversations with the group that's getting together on reopening as well. So there are some challenges around scheduling that are unique to Globe because of our 3-track model, and the way in which there's maybe a little bit less flexibility with respect to how our classrooms are set up with respect to language versus target language versus English, both in the lower campus and in upper campus. There are some challenges there and hybrid models that would need to be considered. And then how we support students with unique circumstances, whether it's special ed or dual language version or unique health circumstances. There's a lot of pieces there what we would need to think through. Also thinking about ways to support teachers in a hybrid format. A number of schools have approached this in a lot of different ways. What some models I've seen out there are doing are really asking teachers to teach both online and in person at the same time, which can be particularly taxing on our teachers. And so how can we, as we're thinking through this process, how can we do so in a way that is mindful of the demands that are on teachers, and to do that, that puts the least amount of stress on them as possible so they can focus on just delivering awesome instruction. And then lastly, there were some logistical questions around how our rooms are set up, the 2 campuses that we have, kind of how they're set up in space, desk arrangement, et cetera, that we also were in discussion about. So these are all things that we are going to continue to bring to the reopening committee to be thinking through. I know that Christy and the staff are thinking about this every day and having good conversations about that. So there's a lot here, but I just kind of want to provide a summary to the board so that you all know that these conversations are continuing to happen, and that we're thinking a lot about what the impacts are going to be for student learning and how we can do this in a way that stays true to our mission of supporting students in their learning and that dual language environment. So that's kind of the end of my report there. Our next meeting is going to be October the 9th at 2 p.m. And we just kind of, at least for this semester, have switched to doing the second Friday of the month at 2 p.m. Who knows what the future will bring, but I think that'll be the case for October and November. At least. So at that, I'll pause and open up for any questions or comments on the second part of this report on school reopening questions.
All right. Thank you, Drew. Appreciate it. All right. Diversity Committee.
Hi, everyone. Just sent out a communication. We haven't had a meeting yet, a formal meeting yet this academic school year, but that communication was very detailed and it went out to, I say 30 stakeholders. The stakeholders included any parent that previously or faculty member that previously served on the diversity committee, anyone who's ever dropped into a meeting and said that, hey, I want to be a part of this, anyone who, any faculty member that was identified by another faculty member, someone that might be good on the diversity committee. And so over the last couple of years, we've had a lot of people come and go, and everyone has strong feelings about DEI and feel like that's a good place for them to get plugged in. Just trying to really this year be very deliberate as we move forward in in our meetings, in our work, and since we have done the framework that we really set forth to do last year or the last couple of years with the equity audit and now having the vendor on board. And so this is the time that I wanted to devote this year to being creative. And now that we have folks on board that are supposed to be doing our processes and policies and the really rigid work, but if there's anything that people want to bring forth as potential initiatives, this is the year to do it. And so wanting to really renew our team and make sure that we have folks that are really actively involved in the DEI work and understanding that, of course, there's no time greater than now in our country, in our school, that we would want to focus on these things. And so that communication went out. It had a great deal of information in it about, what I'm looking for. And really, I was told by one of my long-term members that it was, she said petty. I don't think she meant petty, but it was very clear that I was looking for active membership and not bystanders. But I definitely appreciate, I hope the club, it was very clear in that regard. And so I did get some feedback. I was very happy to get the amount of administrative feedback that I did from administrators that want to still participate on the DEI committee. I'll have to meet with Christy about seeing if we can reduce the number, make sure we're strategic in who we have there as far as faculty and staff, just because we do want an environment where we do have faculty and admin there. So saying that if we're coming up with something that's just completely out of the box, we have someone there to let us know that this is not really realistic, or, this is something that we've already worked on, it's happened before, but we also don't want to have such top-heavy membership that it feels like these things are being dictated from within, because the admin meets on their own, the faculty meets on their own. They don't need board and stakeholders and all those people to be there. So we're trying not to do that as well. So I was really excited about that. I have a meeting with, I've already had a meeting with Christy regarding Unconscious Roots and where they are in their process. And Christy, she didn't report on it today, but I do recall that there was supposed to be a training last week, right? Last Wednesday.
Yeah, Katie's going to do it in her strategic planning report.
Okay, and I'm looking forward to hearing the update on that. But then Christy and I are still working the schedule, hopefully this week, or maybe next week, but hopefully this week, a meeting with myself, herself, and Conscious Roots to just talk about some concerns, feedback, strategy as it relates to the work that they're doing. And so we're really excited that they're open to doing that and that we're getting just kind of that framework in place. And we already have a bunch of feedback regarding DEI committee initiatives. And so I've mentioned that in the communication. They go from making sure that financial requirements from the school to purchasing school supplies or band equipment or whatever it is accessible, lunches and things like that, so that our socioeconomically diverse population can participate. We're also hearing some feedback regarding children who learn differently and making sure that we're able to properly service them. And that would be something that we would make sure that we're partnering with the academic committee, because we like to stay in our lane over here. But like I tell everyone, that all roads go through the DEI committee. There shouldn't be a lane that that does not consider how the diverse populations are being impacted by the work that they're doing. So that's been brought up. And we've also talked a long time about this summer and actually last month with Drew about curriculum that is very race conscious and anti-racist curriculum, and making sure that we're using those resources to advise and recommend to the administration who's responsible for developing curriculum, and making sure that we're, again, staying in our lane as the board, saying, hey, this is just something that's been brought to us, and something that we're thinking about, or something that looks like a really good idea, but you guys, y'all people with the degrees in this and boots on the ground, go ahead and continue to do great work. So we're really excited this year to just do some new things, because I just feel like we've spent at least the last 2.5 years just really trying to make sure that our formal processes are in place. And this is kind of that transformative year that we can just trust the process that we're putting in place, the people that we've hired and spent good money on, and letting them do their work while we come up with some other governance things that will help the school move forward in that way. So that's where we are. Like I said, our meetings will be on the second Tuesday. So our next meeting is October 13th, I believe that is. Yeah, it's October 13th. And even though we're limiting the committee to 13 folks, it will always be open. And I think we'll just have to do a better job at communicating, because I've heard from certain parents that say, well, they don't know that they can attend committee meetings and where are they posted. And now that we're virtual, like making sure that our links are posted on maybe the website or on the calendar for our particular meetings, but making sure also they're not done in a way that the public can like spam us, because I know those Zoom things where they're jumping in and showing private parts is problematic. We don't want to do that. So we don't want that at all. So just making sure that maybe it's in our newsletter or something like that, that will help the community feel like they can drop in on a meeting the same way they could have when it was at the school and we had them posted. And I know we do a good job of advertising our board meetings, but maybe not as clear on how to join in to our publicly open committee meetings. So that's it. That's what I got. Any questions?
Thanks, Monique. Questions for Monique? Thank you, Monique. You bring up a good point about the committee accessibility. I know we've been working on getting Board on Track up and running, and we're still have some training that we're doing as a board on that. So Kevin, I think I would just say, let's make a note to make sure that I did kind of drop a calendar of all the known meetings for the next month that we'll show at the end. And then Kevin, maybe you and Catrice can work to make sure that each one of these is in the weekly newsletter, at least the week before the meeting is occurring, or just posting the whole, committee agenda, committee calendar basically at the beginning of each month. So, but we'll work on communications for that. All right, thank you. Let's move on to finance. Luis.
All right. Well, we have a low-key month for finance usually. We just finished the budget last month, and we are working. Well, the CFO and our finance staff is working on the audit for tax purposes and operations. But so far, I wanted to show the actuals against the budget for July and August, and we are a little bit ahead. I will say, $35,000 ahead on net income due to our expenses are a little bit lower than expected. Well, not that expected, but lower than average. I mean, mainly because operations and, operating plans and anything that is in person is been lower than last year, obviously because of the pandemic. And our revenue are a little bit low, but it's in the expectations range. We were expecting around around 11% decline year over year. I mean, we're probably gonna get some a little bit more money or we downfall in the future. Another thing I wanted to mention is like, it seems like our student numbers are aligned with our budget. We're in 1,074, I think Christy mentioned, and we did our budget at 1,071. So it seems like our revenue is going to be in line, maybe a little bit higher. We'll see. We'll see next month or next quarter. The last thing I wanted to mention is like, we are looking for strategies of what to do with our cash balance. I mean, we have around $6.5 million in the bank, 6.6 actually, and we have to cover some covenants, but there is some flexibility there to invest into asset, well, I will say asset backed securities for the government. So we are studying those aspects, but nothing in concrete yet to bring to the board. That's it. So I have nothing else unless there's any questions.
Questions for Luis? All right. Thank you, sir. All right, Megan.
Okay, so here's the chart that I said I would be showing you guys each month. Again, I have the disclaimer that we've kind of changed how we are doing the WePay deposits, and WePay is the payment processor that we use through Aplos, which is all of our annual fund donations go through Aplos. We moved them halfway through August to monthly donations. And instead of being deposited on the last day of the month, they're being deposited on the first day of the month. So because of that, we had about 17 donations in August that were not deposited until September 1st. So you're not seeing all of August in these numbers, so just know that. One thing I did want to point out with board giving, it shows we don't have anything. We actually are at 67% of giving right now with board members. And we actually, if you count a pledge that I received, we're at 78%. So thank you guys for jumping right on that and making your donation, and they will be shown in next month's report. But currently we are at 6% of our 6% of our goal for annual fund and 3% overall for unrestricted funding. And that's including the expenses that we have, which are pretty minimal at this point. Any questions about that? Okay, you can go to the next slide. Our committee is working on a partnership packet, which is basically a digital tool and printed tool that we can use to solicit sponsorships externally for annual fund. I've been working with Drew and the academic committee and other sources, just gathering data to include in that report. Our goal is to get it completed by the end of October, and then we're going to start working on pulling together a prospect list in October and start soliciting some folks to hopefully increase our numbers there. In the past, we do have one annual fund sponsor currently, and in the past we've had a few here and there, but nothing recurrent. So I'm hoping to change that starting this year. For grants, unfortunately with the DEI grant that we were planning to submit with Teach Diversity, the grant closed due to some budget limitations that the organization had, but they are planning to reopen it in November once they start their new fiscal year. So we had pretty much completed that proposal, and we'll be able to complete it or submit it once that reopens in November, barring that they don't change any of the requirements or you know, who can apply and what the program actually is. But we are ready to submit that, but unfortunately did not get that one in. We are still waiting reimbursement for last year's security grant. So that should be coming in soon. We did spend the money on time and submitted all of our paperwork on time. So we're just waiting on that. There's 2 facility grants that should be coming up soon. We're expecting about $25,000 per campus. They're still trying to figure out how they want to divvy it up. I believe everybody's getting, and correct me, Christy, if I'm wrong, everybody's getting 25,000 per campus. And then there's some extra funds that they're trying to decide if they want to use free and reduced lunch money or FTE numbers. Obviously for us, we would want to use FTE because free and reduced lunch doesn't really correspond with upgrading facilities and buildings and that sort of thing. Do you need to say something, Christy?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's correct. And just to give you some reference points, last year it was 40,000 per campus that we were able to get to do some upgrades and work on our buildings. But they have changed it this year where everybody will get the 25 per campus, but then the extra money, they haven't decided how they're going to, that's what Megan is talking about, how they're going to divvy that part up.
Yeah.
So where we are with that.
So hopefully they go with the FTE because we're a pretty large charter school, so we would get a little bit bigger piece of that pie. As far as other grants go, we are applying for 5 general operating support grants. Our goal is to get them submitted by the end of October as well. They are Public Supermarkets Charities, Georgia Power Foundation, Georgia Pacific Foundation, Regions Bake, and State Farm. So if anybody else knows folks who work for these companies or any other organizations that have grant opportunities, please send them my way. I'd be happy to chat with them. It's always good to get our foot in the door and make those connections. Oftentimes there's internal grants that are available that you have to have an internal contact to be able to access or be eligible to apply. So let me know if anybody has any contacts there. Globetrot, excuse me, we are moving forward with the November 6th virtual event. We have renewed our contract with Do Jiggy, which is the fundraising platform that we've used since the beginning. This unfortunately is going to be the last year that we can use the current payment structure that Do Jiggy offers, where it's a flat subscription fee. They're moving over to a percentage of how much you earn, like all the other fundraising vendors currently have. So this is kind of our last hurrah of being able to keep as much money in our pockets as possible, unless we look at some major changes to how we do things next year. But for this year, we're kind of keeping it status quo. We don't need one other thing to be worrying about, especially with everything else going on. As far as prizes and fundraising tracking goes, I've been chatting with a lot of parents and my committee members, and I sent an email to the board, and I would love to kind of hear your thoughts. We've kind of discussed how things have gone in the past and whether or not we want to continue in that same way this year. As you guys may or may not know, in the past, we have, as far as like tracking donations per fundraiser, which is per student, we have made those numbers available to the public so everybody can see, you know, Bobby raised $20 and Kara raised, $30. We have 100% participation goal. So closer to the end of the event, a lot of parents would go into their child's class, class roster, look to see who hadn't received any donations, and then donate, a few dollars to reach that 100% participation goal. I looked at, how much money we were really raising with that strategy. There were last year 196 donations that were $1 to $5, and they all totaled less than $100. So I think we just need, Globetrot is our biggest fundraiser. It is a school-led event. The board is responsible for, helping manage and execute it. With our strategic plan and the DEI initiative that we have in place, is this really, what we want to put forth? Because I feel like it's excluding folks who for whatever reason, may not want to donate to Globetrot or not have the financial means. I just know personally as a parent, you know, I'm an outsider. I don't have children at Globe, but if I did and I chose not to make a donation and somebody came and made a donation on my child's behalf, that would be upsetting to me. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I know it's strange because I'm the fundraiser and we want to get as much money as we can. That's the ultimate goal, is to raise money for the school. And I don't want to make this event any less successful, but I think we just need to be more mindful and strategic about how we go about some of our fundraising initiatives. And, you know, especially with like the strategic plan, we're trying to align all aspects of the school to our DEI mission. So I would love to kind of hear, I know Drew weighed in, and thank you for sending me that. But does anyone else have any other comments or suggestions?
Megan, I don't know if, I thought I responded to the email when you kind of asked these questions about that, or either I responded or I felt like my comments were would have been repetitive to some of the other feedback that you received, so I spared you my comments. But for the record, I totally, you know, do agree that the competition around, you know, 100% participation and going back in and putting $1 on everyone's account, but also advertising the kids who have the most money and raise the most money, because these kids don't have jobs. So it's really, you know, advertising the parents who secured the most funds or wrote the biggest check. And we do just have to really be mindful of what that means for our community. And I get that it is a great fundraiser, but at some point, you know, we have to be, again, mindful at what cost are we raising funds. And I don't think that our larger donors, I mean, and I do know some of them personally, like, I don't think that they would be less inclined to give if the name wasn't, their name wasn't advertised or their kid didn't win. I think that they just want to give money and they use this time to do it. And so I do trust that you will balance those things, because you do this professionally and you understand what incentivizes people to give. But I really appreciate us doing it, being very mindful of what we're preaching as it relates to DEI and inclusivity and equity amongst kids, because even putting $1 on someone's account who did not give, or putting $1 on someone's account so it can be compared against the individual who has 5,000 on theirs, it doesn't sit very well. So we're just hoping that you will continue to do exactly what you're doing right now and be mindful, but we also understand that it is a fundraiser. And I know that we get into this when we're talking about these types of things, Globetrot, and even with, you know, the PTCC, we get into it when we're talking about the auction and, you know, how many tickets do you give away? And if people can't buy tickets, then can they really participate in the auction? And is this going to be a problem? And then we say, you know what, we make it accessible to everybody, because at the end of the day, it's for our community. And if someone can't afford it and they want to be there, we want them to be there. So I really appreciate you putting that conversation in here in the forefront and being willing to say, okay, well, we'll sacrifice this aspect of it for the greater good. And if we have to circle back with some of our larger past donors that are still with us that seem to have not given because of this change structure, then maybe we'll revisit that next year. But I'd hope that we can at least try something this year that appears more equitable, and see what, you know, why they didn't do it the next year. Like, hey, my kid didn't get recognition for the $5,000 and I just didn't give it. I don't know those kind of people at Globe. So I'm hoping that that's not the incentive. So thanks for looking at that closely.
And we are still looking at having incentives, because that's part of this, you know, very fun event. And I think that gets all the kids excited to go out and raise funds for the school. So we're still doing the buffs. We're still, you know, looking at fun ways that we can, because that's the other thing, is we're virtual this year. So a lot of the experiences and things that classes won if they reached 100% participation, we're going to have to kind of rethink a lot of that. So, but yeah, that's great feedback. Not only not showing the kids who don't raise any money, you know, but also not really recognizing the amount for the kids who raise the most money too. And then I have had some conversations too about why the Globetrot donations do not count towards your annual fund totals. So I'm happy to answer anybody's questions. I've had a few people reach out to me. I just envision annual fund as more of our, the focus is internal. So it's an investment that our board members, our staff, and our families are making in the school. And Globetrot is more of a fundraiser that can, you know, the reach is much wider. We're looking at external audiences, getting, you know, reaching out to extended family members, friends, neighbors who can give as well. And, you know, to me, I'm not counting, like, you know, the Smith family did not give to annual fund, but they gave to Globetrot. So I'm not going to like reach out to you individually and single you out. I'm just giving everybody opportunities to give in the way that, you know, they feel most comfortable and the amount that is most meaningful for them. Yes, I still do have a recommended amount because that's, you know, trying to help us meet our goal. But I know that it's all an average, and if a family prefers to give through Globetrot versus annual fund, then that's great. If Globetrot is not as successful because more people are giving the annual fund, that's great too. Honestly, we make more money for the school if people give more to annual fund than Globetrot. But you know, it's a balance. Everybody has different preferences and what they feel comfortable with. So, you know, anything that they can give is appreciated and meaningful. So that's the message I've been trying to get across to parents and staff. Any other discussion around that? Anybody else have any opinions? We're having our planning meeting tomorrow, so if anybody's interested too, we're meeting via Zoom at 7:30.
Thank you, Megan, for sharing and bringing this up too. I just wanted to say that I second Monique's comments as well, and thank you for the work you're doing on it.
Sure. And I know these are hard to, you know, discussions to have, and I am new, and I think some people probably feel I'm coming in and rocking the boat, but I'm also trying to be fair and align ourselves and our actions to our strategic plan, which we've worked very hard to put together. So that's my motive. You know, I'm not trying to leave people out or make people feel guilty. It's just, it's how fundraising works. So if anybody, go ahead.
Sorry, Megan, it's Ryan. Yeah, I mean, I think that comes through, and I kind of wanted to, I guess, mention that is that, you know, it occurs to me that the, you know, 100% participation was at one time, I'm sure the goal was to show community and to make people feel invested and to help folks out and show kind of solidarity and things like that to get class prizes. So I'm guessing the intention was very positive in the beginning. And so I think it's great that we're looking at this and seeing how is this perceived and what is actually happening and is it accomplishing the goal that we have. So I think everything that you're contemplating and looking at and being thoughtful about is exactly dead on, timely, on mission, and all of those things. So I agree with a lot of what has been said. So I don't think you're rocking the boat. I think you're doing what you're asked to do as a you know, part of the governing board of the school. And so I think to your point too, we'll find out what happens, but you know, how much money we raise is not the end goal. The how matters just as much as the what in everything that we do. And that's, I'm really thankful that you're thinking through that. So I appreciate that.
And it's going to be a weird year just because we can't all be together running around the track, which is, you know, what the event is about. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. But if anybody else has any comments or feedback, please, you know, you don't feel comfortable talking during the board meeting, please shoot me an email. I'm kind of compiling everyone's responses so that we can have a good discussion during the planning meeting tomorrow. So thank you for those who did share. And lastly,
Hey, I just wanted to pipe up real quick.
go ahead.
You're not rocking the boat at all. You moved us like 1,000 steps forward. So don't feel like you're rocking anybody's boat. Just keep running with it. It's doing awesome.
Awesome. And I'm happy to answer anybody's questions. Like I've had several parents, you know, wonder why I'm doing certain things. So I'm happy to share my reasons behind those too. Okay, our next meeting, we did change our typical meetings to accommodate the communications committee. So we have moved to the second Tuesday every month, and we've also moved up the time. We used to meet at 7:30. We're going to meet at 6 p.m. So our next meeting is October 13th at 6 p.m. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Megan. All right, I think we'll move a little bit quicker here with some of these. Thank you for your patience and perseverance here. Communications, Jonathan was not able to make it, so I put a couple of bullets in there for him. I sat in on that meeting, so just giving you an overview update. You can read his report in the packet. He's working on updating the committee org charts. I know that everybody has responded to him at this point, so thank you for following up as asked. Another big thing that he's working on with Catris is brand consistency. We have the new logos, we have colors and fonts and all of those great things. And now we're just working on making sure that they're consistent and that we're disseminating everything with a brand style guide. We've typically done that through kind of exchanging documents. And there's an idea out there that, you know, there's some websites where you can centralize access to these things so that you only have one version of it. And then anytime it's updated, you constantly have the most updated version and you're not emailing Catris for version 4.6 or whatever. So, so we're, you know, becoming more professional by the day as we do this. So it's looking good. And the website, you all know we've, you know, had a new website launched several weeks back, maybe a month and a half. There's still, Catris has done a good job of kind of continuing to follow up and make edits and updates as she finds glitches and things. And we had a specific discussion about, there's some just board compliance things that Kevin flagged that we just need to make sure we get updated, but they connected really quickly after our meeting to start working on that. So those are just a couple of the things that we discussed. And you can look at the report for a couple of other items. All right, let's go ahead and move on to ABBA and hear about governance.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. We met last Thursday.
Can you speak up? It's hard to hear you, ABBA.
Can you hear me now?
You're still a little muffled for me.
I'm having audio issues.
Oh, that's getting better.
Is this better?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Great.
All right. So we met last week, the governance committee, and an overview of our meeting output is, you know, as you know, that we did approve the bylaws, and we're, as a next step, we're going to extract some of the governance items and highlight it for the board so we can start implementing them and everyone be on the same page. So that's an action item. We, you know, like a kind of a talking sheet, kind of cheat sheet type thing for us all to just have the high level processes that are in there without you having to read it verbatim. Next is the staff handbook. We've collected feedback from Christy, and we're going to go back and see if there are any more holes or gaps that need answers and try to progress that. I think we're nearing the end of that project, so we're looking forward to wrapping that up. Maybe it'll take a couple more cycles and then we should be done with that. And then we've identified a couple future projects, and one is coming up with a governance committee vision statement and the, you know, setting forth the purpose of the governance committee and how we plan to operate and hope to operate to make a more efficient board, best practice, a board that's up to best practices and customary standards. And that's generally it. So we have our hands full for these projects that we're trying to hand off, and our next meeting is October 15th.
All right, thank you. Questions for Abba? She's not letting the foot up off the gas even after the bylaws, continuing to work. We had I was in that meeting as well. It's really good, robust conversations. So, all right. Strategic planning, Katie.
Hi, yes. Updated last month with ideas for how we're making some modifications to the strategic plan, looking at timeline with a priority on recalibrating the vision of teaching excellence to include virtual teaching and a remote platform. So a work group meeting has been held about that since the last update to the board. And so that was work done in that initiative, which was part of core instruction. And then with the DEI initiative, or the DEI bucket, both Monique and Christy referenced small group meetings that have been happening by grade level. The idea of dividing it by grade level allows for groups to speak about the ages of the students, or as with relevance to the age and sort of developmental level of the students, and how to adapt. So those meetings have been happening between or in small groups with Conscious Roots, who is our DI vendor. Christy and I met today with Shyam Kumar from North Star, who's our strategic planning vendor, talking about our timeline for our initiatives, so that we can have a really comprehensive update to the board at our November meeting, or I guess it's actually the first week in December based on how we did the dates, but that will be coming, and we're doing that work now. So our next meeting, we've got scheduled for Friday, October the 9th, for Christy and I to check in, and that's it. We keep plugging along.
Great. Questions for Katie? All right, thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
All right, facilities. I'm gonna give you a quick update. There was no meeting this month. We talked last time about moving to quarterly meeting schedule. I did send you all a little note about discussing facilities committee chair nominees and new business, so we will do that. And then I just wanted to share with you a really quick kind of update on the upper campus entrance. Christy and I just, the staff has been working on that. The facilities committee kind of stepped back after the initial planning, but just wanted to kind of give you an update on what that's looking like. So if you are standing in the breezeway looking towards the parking lot from this view, I'm going to show you a sketch rendering from this perspective. And because it took me about 10 minutes to understand the perspective until Christy showed me this picture, I started with this picture so that you don't do what I did. I was thinking this was an overhead view and I was totally baffled. But if you're looking towards the parking lot, the entrance is kind of pushed out a little bit to alleviate that kind of confined feel. So it really is kind of a access point with a gate and some brick columns, and then some nice fencing here that is both secure but also welcoming, and doesn't feel kind of, we don't want it to feel like it's a security gate. And there will be some benches and things here in this courtyard as well, so that becomes more usable space for kids and staff and things like that. So just a quick update that we will have that done before we're back in school for good. But that's what you can expect to see there in the near future. All right, and then our last committee update, ED Support and Eval Committee. I've been working with Drew and Monique to schedule a meeting. Same as last month, I reminded you that we had draft goals for Christy, and we kind of need to finalize those, but we will present those an executive session in the October board meeting on October 26th. So expect to have some pre-reads for that and a discussion in that meeting. All right. With that, we're going to move on to old business. We already covered this. Everyone's already updated their membership and gotten with Kevin, so that's good. We're looking good on annual funds, so no need for that reminder there. And then I promised you kind of a committee calendar look ahead, and I think what we'll do is just do this in each meeting, just so we, are able to share with the public when we have our meetings. And I think I got these all right based on what I saw from your slides, because some of them were late updates. So Drew, you're on the 9th, Monique and Megan are on the 13th, Abba the 15th. I know Jonathan's on the 16th, and then finance here. And then I think Katie, you said you're meeting with Christy on the 9th. I don't know if that's official meeting or just you and her touching base. So, all right. So this is next month, and once we get the board on track training complete and we're doing all of the meetings through there, then that stuff should be like clockwork and available through board on track. But again, to just kind of share an overview of what our cadence is, I wanted to take a look at this. Any questions, comments, corrections on this? Scanning. Okay. All right, great, thanks. Okay, so 3 things that we need to cover tonight. The first is the school reopening committee, and I'm going to show you the bylaws and kind of what our options are and make a recommendation and see what you all think. And then I think I shared with you that we did had a volunteer for the facilities committee chair and for the board secretary, and I got I think 1 person responded to the nominations request. So I would like to entertain a vote for those 2 things to get us, make sure that we're filling these seats. All right, so without further ado, I don't know if you all, I dropped this in here a couple of days ago, but I'm going to give everybody a couple of minutes. I will give everybody 1 minute to read this real quick, and then we'll talk about it. All right. I'm going to expand my view so I can see everybody and look at the text as necessary. So, based on our bylaws and everything we've been discussing about having a committee to oversee the reopening, and that's kind of naturally happened, I just wanted to make sure that we were following what we said we would do within our bylaws. And so that's why I wanted to offer these 2 options to you. So the first option is that we have a board committee. It's a special committee. It's similar to the strategic planning committee or the charter renewal committee. We stand it up. It's temporary. A board member is the chair of that committee, and then we decide what that composition is. And then we ask that the chair of that committee report back to the board, just like they would for a typical committee, and similar to what Katie has been doing for strategic planning. The second option is a special committee that would actually be headed up by the school and by the administration. And so this would be a reopening advisory committee that would still be advising the board on what we should do for our reopening plan. The board still votes on that plan and approves that plan, but we really kind of shift the leadership of that committee to Christy and the administration, with board's members taking seats on that committee. And again, we decide what the composition of that committee is. But the real difference is it kind of led by a board member, or is it led by Christy and the administration? You know, I've talked to Christy about it. I've talked to Drew. I've talked to Katie separately, not all together. And then kind of after looking at these and talking with those folks, I would recommend that I think it's in our best interest to have this be an administration-led committee. Christy's been leading it already. I think the composition is already very with board and parent representation on the committee. So I am pretty comfortable with the direction that we've already chosen to go. And I just want to make sure that we are kind of formalizing that so that we're within the bylaws of what we're doing. But the discussion really is, that's my opinion based on kind of reading this and what we've done so far. But I want to open up a discussion about these two options or another option, if anyone sees one, about how best to form this advisory committee to advise the board on a reopening.
Thanks, Ryan. One thing I would just add in here as I'm seeing it too is that I kind of agree with how you're viewing it. I do think that with the reopening committee, there's going to be a lot of sort of in the weeds and logistical matters that are going to be talked through in these details, which I think makes it perhaps a little bit more appropriate to have it be administration led in that regard. So I think that to help us sort of preserve that for governance and management, I think it can be really helpful to go the school-based communities route.
I think that the nature of kind of the decision should fall on what the decision is and whose purview the decision will fall in ultimately. So when we're talking about like school reopening and what that plan will be, is that a board level decision? And I know that either one of these groups are actually making recommendations to the board. However, if the board, if it's a 80%, we've decided in our board retreat, right? Like nothing's 100% for admin or for the board. We're still in just this gray area. But if we can find where we are on that line and let that guide us as to which one of these ways, these committees, no matter if it's this one or the next one, next special committee, just kind of figuring out, is this a school-based one? Is this a board-appointed one based off of who is going to have to actually own the decision? And I think under that theory, then it would not fall in line with kind of what you're saying right now, Ryan. But I think how we got here definitely falls in line with what you're saying, meaning how do we decide on the committee, how we would go about recruiting for the committee, what the committee's work is going to be, how we decided on who would be on the committee. And I say we, but it wasn't us. This was already an administrative-led function that we've trusted our admin team to do in a certain way. So if that's the way that we've started with this, then I get continuing, because I think to change it now may end up being, well, hey, we co-signed on these people. We thought that these were great people, and we trusted that our admin would properly vet all the applicants and weigh all the important factors. But that was not something that the board voted on and decided that was the process that we were going to use. So I don't want to own something at this level that we didn't own at an earlier point. And so for that reason, I would say let it be an admin level thing, that personally. But I do think it should be something that we have to say, well, what is going to be our role at a later time? And do we want recommendations from a team that we had more of a hand in picking and appointing and participating in?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think my perspective was that Drew and Katie were involved pretty early on, and I don't know if we made the decision at that point that it was admin led, or if it was, you know, if they were collaborating on it. I don't know. That might be a better question for them. But I think for me, the board is the decision maker. Like, the board must approve the plan. Like, that is our decision. To me, that is pretty clear. But I feel like the staff is best positioned to lead the recommendation, because they're the ones that this has come up a couple times with committees tonight, that are on the ground and know the details, and they're gonna have a better purview to say this won't work, or, you know, if we ask that question, well, did you consider this? Did you consider that? Yes, we did, and here's what we decided and why. And having, you know, 2 sitting board members in that room, to me, seems to be adequate oversight, I guess. But again, that's me. So, I mean, I would love to hear others, you know, thoughts on this. Because
I certainly agree with what you said, despite everything I said before. I do agree, because you and Drew made the same point, that basically who's in the weeds and who's best equipped to make the recommendation. I just find it, I guess I find it difficult, and maybe that's the whole point of the board, to ebb and flow as the need comes up, to say that, hey, I'm okay with taking a backseat to this issue, even though I know it's ultimately my decision. I want to be informed by an admin-led process versus wanting to be informed by a board-led process. I almost, in that instance, can't really think of a situation where it would be appropriate for us as administrators of the school to lead an advisory committee to the board without, you know, respecting that, hey, the admin will always know what's in the weeds and what's boots on the ground. And I think that that's what we were saying with, you know, our committee participation and so on and so forth. So I'm kind of hard to think of a situation where it would be anything but kind of admin led, and especially if the recommendation is coming to the board.
Yeah. And which it most certainly is. I'd love to hear a little bit from others too. Monique and I, we like to talk a lot, and we talk about these things all the time, but I don't want just our airtime here.
Luis here. I think that should be an admin led committee. It's just the board function is to monitor and control the school, so that our fiduciary duty is to protect the school from the long term. But we don't have enough information or time to lead a completely operational committee like this one, and it's school reopening. So this is completely on the hands of the administration. We should definitely monitor. So I completely side with what Ryan just said. So
I agree too. You know, and I responded to an email that Christy sent inquiring. I guess it must have been like early summer, before we even knew what DeKalb's verdict was going to be about coming back in the fall and how that would look. So I as a board member, I felt like, you know, there was opportunity to be involved or not. And even with my getting involved, it was to say, you know, this is what I've been doing in my professional life for the last several months. I'm perfectly, you know, I'm happy to participate if that perspective is valuable. Also knowing that there's a lot of expertise in the community and amongst staff and board members. So I'm comfortable with it being administrative led.
Me too. I think that's where all the expertise is. Our job really is just to pipe up if they want another set of opinions, and then have a little bit of that oversight role of if we have an idea that we think needs to be added into it, to be able to add that in. But that's what they do.
I think we just lost Monique. I don't know if I'm not sure what happened. Let's see if we get her back here. Other
I
thoughts?
agree with what everybody's been saying as well. I feel admin needs to take the lead, and we can provide feedback as needed and approve once they kind of have a plan together.
One thing I'd add to this, though, while I am very much in agreement that it needs to be admin led, because as I've been talking with Christy about this since like March and April, and it's very much hard even for me to keep up with like sort of constant evolving nature of this conversation. That being said, I think we are ultimately making a vote on this, and so in that, I want to make sure that we make kind of a commitment as a board to really stay on top of this. And part of it is going to be, I'm going to do the best I can to communicate out about how things are moving. And I know Christy and Katie will be as well, but we do want to be making sure that we're really on top of this when we vote.
I agree. That's a good point.
There we go. All right, Monique's coming back. I think, Abba, have we heard from you? Just to check.
Oh yeah, no, maybe you didn't hear me, but no, I completely agree.
Okay.
I completely agree about the role of oversight and deferring to people who really have their hands in the, are in the weeds of it, to advise and inform the board, and who put the time in, opposed to board members who are not as close to it. Also, I think it gives the board an opportunity to give a little bit more maybe objectivity than if you're in it on a day, if you try to get involved too closely, or to just be an objective point of view for people who are in it every day. So I think that's one. I think, I don't know if I missed Monique's point earlier though, in terms of the committee members and the selection of who's on that committee. That's one of the things as the governance board that I want to try to, bring in, is just more transparency into how members are selected for things like committees and board seats and things like that. So I don't think that's unique to this particular situation. I think the circumstance kind of drove us to where we are. I'm okay with who the members are. I think they're great qualified, but going forward, I think in general, just for the integrity of the board and for people who are interested, just to have transparency and understanding of how people are selected, I think will be probably beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, I think, optimally, we would have done this a couple weeks ago, and everything probably would have still proceeded as it did. Christy, I do know that you outlined a process and made a communication calling for kind of interested parties, which is how we got people. Do you want to give just a voiceover or a refresher on what we did there?
Sure. Yes. I sent a communication out, 3 separate ones, to board members, staff, and to parents, asking who was willing to serve on that committee. And so we took that list, and we wanted to make sure when it came to staff that we had a cross-section of diverse body, but also across campuses, to make sure we were looking at lower campus and upper campus. And then for parents, we asked people to please put in what they did for a living, what experience they had with any pandemic experience opening up a building, if they had a medical background, if they had CDC experience. And then Katie and Drew and I really looked over that list. And we also asked them where they lived in DeKalb, because we wanted to make sure we had representation from each of those areas. And we we were able to dwindle it down to make sure we had that cross-sectional representation of parents.
The last, I guess, next thing would be composition, and if we want to talk about minimum requirements, just to make sure that everybody is comfortable with the composition. We're still at a point as we're doing this that, you know, it's not kind of punched and done. So any thoughts on that, about outlining that in the motion to make sure that we're doing our job?
Hey, Ryan, I also wanted to also let people know that anybody who was not selected also received an email to let them know we appreciated them volunteering, and then if anybody on the committee got on there and then realized they couldn't serve, that we'd also come back to them. So just so you know that, FYI.
Thanks, Christy. All right. Any thoughts on composition?
I thought I read this before, but I keep reading it again, and I don't like just the actual words in these two sections. And it seems like, you changed it. It seems like both are saying, okay, any designated special committee will be chaired by a board member. And so that's Brian.
Is it right?
Yeah, that one here, stop moving it. And so will be chaired by a member of the board. And so that's not the one we say we want. And then, but then section 3, under school-based ones, it is saying that the board will prescribe, or something it said, something, appointments to and chair of and any such advisory committee or boards will be made by the board chair. So I'm still trying to appreciate the difference. I fully appreciated when you summarized it, but then when I read it, I didn't feel like the words were lining up with what I thought I was appreciating. So I could not see the distinction that you pointed out, and that we're settling on. I didn't see it in the words, but maybe.
So in the first one, in the 1, 2, 3, 4th line, it says, any designated special committee shall be chaired by a member of the board.
Got that.
And
So
from
then
reading down here, I do not see that language.
no, but then it says that appointments to, the very last line, appointments to and chair of any such advisory committees or boards will be made by the board chair. So while it won't be chaired by the board, we're still making the appointment to the appointments to the advisory committee versus, I guess we can appoint Christy or someone in that committee to be the chair, but we're still making the appointment. Is that what we're doing? But it's not saying that, hey, admin, y'all handle this committee. This is still saying that the board chair is going to make the appointments of the individuals. And so is that why we're going to vote on them? Because we're now making the appointments of the individuals. I didn't think that distinction was as clear as as our discussion implies.
Sorry if I missed this point. So, you know, I think the intent of this, you know, the school-based one, the clearest example would be the parent teacher PTC. That's the clearest example of a school-based committee, something that's intended to be ongoing. Whereas section 2 is intended to be something for like this COVID, where it's a short duration of time specific issue that the board needs to address. And it's not intended to be an ongoing committee.
And that I get. And so, but I think that the conversation we're having tonight almost implies that what we're talking about now could fall under one of these two sections. And we're saying somehow that it will fall under section 2. But I don't, and I get that, but that says that should be chaired by a member of the board. And that's not what we're saying is going to happen here, because this would be an admin-led function. So are we covering our whole our bases here, or am I missing that?
Where I don't, so this is my interpretation of section 3 was that a board member did not need to be the chair of it. I did not see that explicit language. So I think the operative things that I'm looking at is that it can be school-based, and it consists of persons that the board of directors deems, and it may discontinue at any such committee at the board's discretion. So I'm reading this as having more latitude than an official board committee, because it doesn't need to be chaired by a member of the board. It can be established in line with the bylaws and articles of incorporation, but it is an advisory board, and like an advisory council or board to the board that we stand up. So if that is not correct interpretation, then if we're not in agreement on that, then please.
I'm not, because of that last line then. And last line in section 3, Ryan, what do you make of that? Because we're making the appointments to and the chair of any such advisory committees or boards will be made by the board chair. So one, if it did apply to the PTCC, we don't make appointments on the PTCC. But if it does apply to the situation that we're talking about now, these temporary committees, this is still saying that we're making, not that the board member has to be the chair, but we are making the appointments and we are appointing the chair, whomever it may be. The board chair, you are doing that according to this last line in section 3.
So you're saying this last sentence?
It's the last sentence in section 3, appointments to and the chair of any such advisory committees or boards will be made by the board chair unless the board provides otherwise.
Yeah, and I think what I'm saying is I'm asking the board to provide otherwise by voting to stand up a committee led by, I don't really want to just unilaterally appoint a committee. So I would rather that we are in agreement as to how we want to use this governing tool in this situation. And so if I am misinterpreting this language, then by all means, let's try to clarify it.
If what you're saying is that what we're doing here, we are otherwise, so unless otherwise providing, we're providing otherwise that we will set up a school-based committee that is a parent advisory committee or other such advisory committee or board to assist in the mission, which is at this point will be school reopening. And that we're doing this and we're saying that we're not going to make the appointments and we're not going to chair, and we have the ability to do so because we're providing otherwise, then that it seems like it can be all encompassed in section 3. But I don't think that the way I understood the beginning of this conversation, that section 3 somehow was the school-based committees meant committees that the admin runs and advises the board. And then section 2 is committees that the board runs and advises the board. That's not necessarily the language there.
So the way I think we can also do this is with section 2, it says that any designated special committee shall be chaired by a member of the board. The duration, blah, blah, blah. And the duties shall be outlined by the board chair and presented to the board and approved by 2/3 of the vote. So the way I kind of see that happening too is that we would have this board, this special committee that's appointed by the board. We'd have a board chair, and not necessarily, and then the duties of that board chair or the committee could be that the committee is empowered to make these day-to-day decisions or recommendations, but at the point where things need to be voted at, it needs to come through the voice of the chair of that committee. Right?
So that would mean that like for instance, the one we're talking about, then Megan or Drew, I think those are the two that are on that committee, would be the chair, but with duties that the board is defining as being, hey, sit and listen and collect recommendations from the admin that are also on the committee, and you, chair, bring it back to the board as a recommendation.
Yeah.
That could happen in section 2.
Yeah.
I think it's semantics, but you have right now, your 2 lawyers on the group just telling you what on the board, just kind of telling you what the language of it kind of implies. And I'm not, I just wanted to be consistent with our intention if that's what we're doing. So that's the only way section 2 would work, because we're saying it shall be shared by a member of the board. And then I do think section 3 could work if we're doing a whole lot of this provides otherwise, and, or other advisory boards, and there's language in there that could do that as well.
I think trying to do it under section 3 in that way is just twisting it a little too much to get to the end result, whereas section 2 is cleaner to me, and
I agree.
It's intuitive to me to have a recommendation, an ultimate recommendation come from a board member instead of a committee member. So I think that's the intent of it, and I think that's the easier way to do it, and I think it still achieves the same goal.
I totally agree. I just think that wasn't what we were, kind of how section 3 was in the beginning of our conversation, how it was presented. So I just wanted to make sure, but I totally agree.
Yeah, I guess I started there. I started there with Drew or Katie, like chairing the committee, and then kind of after, again, kind of talking to them, I mean, I expect the staff to make a recommendation on school opening. Like, I'm holding them accountable to executing it, not Drew.
Well, yeah, I don't think that's not what I'm saying.
That I want a recommendation from, I want to know that Drew and Katie endorse the decision of the staff and make the recommendation. But in a way, I kind of changed my thinking on that. Like, the onus isn't on them, and I don't want, and I also don't know that we should expect them to be leading the staff and others through this process. This seems to me to be a staff-led process, which led me to this other.
Yeah.
But as the board
I don't see it that way. Yeah, I don't see it that way.
As the board chair, Ryan, you're able to define the duties of the chair of that committee. And so if the chair's duties are simply to report back what the committee advises them on, or what the committee comes up with, if their duty is not to make the decision, I don't know that that's 100% kind of how you end up there, basically on that language. So you just have, we as the board, but you as the board chair, because it calls you as outlined, the duties are outlined by the board chair. And then, we all vote on it. But I
don't see it the way, Ryan, the involvement, the way you categorize it with Drew, for example. I would see it that the staff would make the decision about the opening, and then they would just present it to Drew and I think Megan, and they can question it or whatever. And by the time it gets up to us, we would know that it's been filtered through the staff, through the chair, and then to us. But I don't see it as where Drew, for example, would be the one actually making the recommendation. He relies on the staff to make that, because they're the ones in the weeds. And then Christy or whoever would tell Drew, this is what we've come up with. There's some oversight there as the board chair, so that we're not all doing the oversight. It's more efficient that way. And then we vote on it. But I don't see it as like Drew's job to be the one doing the weeds. because there needs to be some oversight at the board level. I just don't think it should be the whole entire board. It could be one person that says, okay, they're doing their job, but I completely agree with their recommendation, and then filter it that way.
I guess functionally, when we get to this decision point, that's going to be a pretty major decision for the school and the community and teachers and kids. I think we are going to expect a very robust presentation from Christy. I don't think we're going to expect Christy to give Drew and Katie a hour and a half presentation, and then they come back and say, yeah, it looked really good. We trust it. I think the whole board is going to want to see that. They're going to want to see that, and it's not, and Drew isn't going to be the one to answer our questions. When we start asking questions, it's going to be Christy, which is.
Why do you feel that the chair has to be the one to answer the questions? I think just like with this committee, if he's with the board, the whole board, you're the board chair, but if someone's asking a question that's best answered by the facilities committee, you're deferring to facilities, you're deferring to us. And so if Drew is the chair of this committee, and we're saying Drew, not making whoever, but if a board member is the chair, then what is the difference with saying, hey, this is my team and the committee came up with this and Christy's going to present it? I don't know. I just wanted to fall. We brought up the conversation of falling within these two our guidelines, and the way we're discussing it, it doesn't for me. And I get what Abba is saying about making it work, but if we vote to say, hey, I think the rubber stamp for the chair name needs to be needs to be able to be Christy, needs to be able to be someone from admin, then we can't put it under Section 2 because it's a shall thing. And if we're trying to make it under Section 3, it just has to be, there's a whole lot of, there's some finessing that would have to happen for it to be under Section 3. And we can do that if that's what the board votes to do. But our governance person is not comfortable with that.
Because I want to push back a little bit, because Section 3 doesn't have, for something as important that's required for a special committee, should have board oversight. I'm not saying board should lead it, but it should have board oversight. So the question is, should it be the whole entire board doing the oversight, or should it be one person or two? I think it's just, in this case, a committee doesn't require the attention of the whole board, but oversight does not mean leading it, the board chair, okay, maybe the title of board chair, but it can be so appointed that it's just more of an oversight role, so that at the point where there is actually a report or so, that would be Christy. That doesn't mean that there was no oversight, or that Drew's not the chair, whoever's not the chair. It just means that we can, if there's ever an issue, we want to be able to say there was board oversight for something as important as this. Doesn't mean that Drew has to do the day-to-day of the committee, and it can be set up the way, you are articulating it, especially when it comes to the reporting and documentation, whatever. I just think the school-based committee section does not really require board oversight, and it's a lesser important profile position than Section 2.
Yeah, I think what got me here is that this gives you the flexibility to define that there will be a committee led by the executive director with no less than 2 board members, no less than 2 parents, no less than 2 medical professionals in the related field, that will advise the board on school reopening. And so you have 2 board members that are regularly meeting and involved with that committee. But don't forget that at the end of the day, the board votes. Board has oversight because the board votes. This committee does not have the authority to make the decision. They are recommending, and then the board is going to ask a lot of hard questions, and then the board is going to vote and decide. So I guess I read this section as, hey, from time to time, there are going to be things that come up that we may not foresee. like a pandemic, and you have the authority to structure a committee that is going to help the board govern through that, and it's pretty flexible, right? And so that's how I took this section, is that it says that. And I do think, I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing here, because I think this language that says will be made by the board chair, and I think we're sometimes referring to this and thinking this means the chair of the committee, but I think this means the chair of the board.
Yeah, I agree. It means
okay.
The board. That means
so. I don't know, that, I guess my interpretation was that this had a pretty good amount of flexibility to allow us to do what we think is the best structure. So I think, to me, the question is, what is the best structure? And then if we're saying the best structure that we propose does not fit within our bylaws, then I'm not exactly sure what to do, to be honest with you. Then we might have to do exactly what you were saying before, of like, well, the best thing we can do within the bylaws is the board appointed special committee. We'll make one of the board members a chair. We'll direct them that, Christy has the authority to lead the committee, and they are there as a board liaison and to provide input and feedback. But at the end of the day, we're still expecting Christy to make, to represent the recommendation to the board, because I think that's what I'm getting hung up on, is and then we may just be talking past each other a little bit, but there was a point at which, Abba, you said that whoever the board chair for that committee would present it to the board, and to me that
they are as delegated,
a whole lot of information.
I mean, and when I said present, I meant more just like put it up for the vote, not necessarily be the person doing the whole presentation.
I gotcha. Okay. Yeah. All right.
I think it really just comes down to the vision for what this committee looks like. Because to me, in my mind, this is such an important thing that it really does deserve to be like a board kind of level special committee versus like a school-based committee. But I mean, if you just see this running, for like another 2 years, it's going to be a day-to-day thing. I mean, then maybe it is a school-based committee. I see it a little bit differently, but so I think that's probably why I'm pushing for 2, whereas maybe you guys are more for 3, because you see it more as just another day-to-day functioning, special kind of functioning of the school administrative process. I see it a little bit more elevated than that.
Let me ask this a different way. What's the risk to the organization and to the board if we structure it with number 2? What's the risk if we do not have a board member officially appointed as the committee chair?
For me, it's a public facing community, like it's more of a PR type thing, and conveying our seriousness of how seriously we're taking it, right? To me, that's why I think section 2 is more elevated for more serious board attention type matters versus school-based committees that the board, wouldn't necessarily need to have hand-on day-to-day involvement with. Even though we can structure 2 in that way, I just think it communicates and conveys to our community that we're taking it a lot more seriously than a section 3 school-based committee. But over time, if this is something that, COVID is going to be around for another, year or 2, so maybe it does go to section 3. I mean, I just really think it's how you want it to, convey it to, if, parents are asking, what's the board doing? We can say, hey, we have this special committee, and it's, the way it's presented in 2 is more serious to me than it is in section 3 for an answer, for example.
Okay, so that's okay. I'm trying to, I guess I'm in my mind, I'm wondering if that is a risk or if it's like a optics and preference. Like our oversight isn't do you think our oversight is significantly less under this?
I do. I don't think that just because Section 3 doesn't really talk about how to get things specifically done. It says that they won't have authority to act on behalf of the board. But it just seems to me that in section 2, it's talking about the things that need to be voted on, that it's 2/3 of a vote, and that the body has the final authority to approve all recommendations. I think that it's very specific to the gravity of whatever we're trying to do in this particular committee. And it is more of an optics thing. And like I said, I do think you could finesse the other one to do that. I don't know why we would want to. Like, what is the pushback here? Maybe we should hear from Christy. I could kind of see movement and head shaking and some comments that may make the argument that, okay, well, I do believe that this needs to be admin led. And I don't think that number 2 is actually saying that it's no longer admin led. Specifically, it's just saying that there's a person that chairs the committee, meaning wrangles the people, but they're still in a position where they have to accept and receive recommendations, and they're not making the decision no more than the board chair makes all of our decisions. I just think that it is part of the committee, but.
Go ahead, Christy.
I truly believe that this is operations and in the daily operations of what's going to happen to open. And so I do think it needs to be a school-led committee. And then we bring the recommendation to the board with a presentation to vote on. So I do believe it is operational. I did talk to 2 other EDs in DeKalb, and they're school-led committees, school side-led committees. And just like DeKalb, when they presented at the last board meeting, the school came with the plan. So that's my 2 cents.
What school came with the plan for DeKalb?
The superintendent and her cabinet team.
Okay, so, but does 3 say that to you, that this is like, I guess the word school-based committees, the title certainly says that, but the language does not necessarily say that, oh, this is going to be something that is school-led. It is saying that we're, as a board, are kind of appointing all these different people and then doing this whole otherwise provided thing. It does not, I guess, under our general powers to take their recommendations and then vote on it, it doesn't specifically talk about that the way that Section 2 does.
But does that restrict us from doing that?
No, it doesn't. I mean,
I think that's what I'm trying to get at, is like, to me, this design is, you may establish advisory council, advisory board, school council, parent advisory committees, they're giving examples, or such other advisory committees or advisory boards consisting in whole or in part of persons who are not directors as it deems necessary or desirable. So to me, this just gives us a lot of flexibility to say, hey, put together a committee that's going to help you and advise you in the best way that the way that you think is going to best serve the organization, right? And then the number of members on the advisory committees or boards and the manner of their appointment shall be established by the majority vote of directors then in office. So, we still need to vote on that. It doesn't say 2/3, it says majority. This one says 2/3. The board may discontinue at any time at their discretion, and the function and purpose of the committee is to advise the board, right? It doesn't take any decision-making power away from us. Each such committee or body will have such powers and perform such specific duties or functions not inconsistent with incorporation of bylaws as the board may prescribe. So we can make this as tight or as loose as we want to, right? I understand what you're saying is like this this is more specific, but this doesn't tell us we can't be specific, right? I mean, I think we can be as specific as we want to be with this. I was just reading it as, hey, this just affords us flexibility to do what we think makes the most sense. So, I don't know. That's.
So then are you also looking at this committee as the committee that's going to advise, for example, like on the, like on the determination on whether or not, so to me, right, it would be nice to have, and maybe there are two different kind of committees then. Maybe it's a committee that actually briefs the board on the signs of what's going on. This is, you know, whatever schools can open, cannot open. And then there's a school-based committee that does the operational implementation of that, right? To me, that's kind of the elevated nature of number two, someone that's going to come in with a specialist to the board with the recommendation and advise. And, you know, they would be the ones to say, yes, the school, based on whatever, and I'm just talking out loud at this point, but, you know, yes, the school should open, it's safe to open. And then we have the school-based committee that does, this is how we're going to open. We're going to have a two-step phase. It's going to be da, 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 da. To me, that's kind of, but if we're squishing all in one, then I feel like, is this more of a specialized knowledge thing, or is it just an operational thing?
I would say it's both.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. All right. I think we might need to come back to this.
One question, Ryan. You posed the question, I guess, to Abba and I, like, well, you know, what does 3 preclude, basically? Like, why going under 3 is the issue? I guess my question to you would be like, what does 2 preclude for you that makes it harder, other than the fact that we're vesting some this title of chair, meaning the person that me as a board member is looking to make sure that committee is functioning and working and doing what they need to do, to another one of my peers as a board member versus to specifically the admin. What about that is making kind of you uncomfortable, or making you feel like that might not be the best fit for this situation?
I think that having been an operator in a charter school, that feels to me like the board saying, I don't trust you. I don't trust you to make decisions. I don't trust you to lead parents and your staff and board members through a process as the leader of a school. I think it unnecessarily asks 2 really hardworking board members to take on additional responsibilities that I don't think they originally signed up for when they volunteered for this committee. So it's, in a way, it is semantics. Like, I can see it operationally working. And that, again, that's exactly where I started, was, oh, let's, you know, this makes sense. We need some oversight. Let's have a committee. Somebody can chair it. We'll still have Christy do the majority of the heavy lifting and the leadership. And, you know, Drew or Katie can, you know, be the committee chair. But I guess when I really think about it, the expectation, I think, from the board should be that Christy is leading it and making the recommendation with advice from all of these other people and building a diverse team to do that. And it just, I don't know, it just feels to me that if I'm in that position that you're saying, oh, I want you to lead it, but I don't want to officially tell you you're leading it because the board needs to be in charge of this. Or, you know, so I guess I feel like we are more than providing oversight based on our charge as a board by officially having a committee, discussing the composition, putting some guardrails on it, having 2 members of our board and a prior board member on it, to me seems like more than sufficient oversight. But at the end of the day, I think about, for me as a leader, if somebody's going to hold me accountable to something, then give me the latitude to lead through it. And that's like my personal bias is like, don't tell me I'm accountable for it, but you're not going to like recognize that I'm leading it. So I think there's some of my bias in that. So it, yeah. But I honestly, like mechanically speaking, we can make it work. And this is not, it's getting to be whatever time and we still have more things to do. So I mean, I would probably say, you know, one thing I would say is this is exactly what we talked about in the board retreat. So as tired as everybody is, and if you're as hungry as I am, then you're really hungry and thirsty right now. But I applaud you guys for like going through this discussion. I think we probably need to wrap it up and just make a decision. And at this point, I actually more appreciate the conversation that got us here, that if we land on number 2 and we can convince Drew or Katie to be the chair, because I didn't ask them to do that. And Christy says, I know you guys trust me, I can manage through this, then I've gotten what I think we need to get out of it.
I can definitely lead this committee.
So I think at this point, let's see.
Can we just do a straw poll on how people are leaning 2 versus 3? What I do think is we have a bit of a consensus here that Christy is going to take the lead on this committee. And it's really operationally, are we thinking 2 or 3 is best for our board? So can we just do a quick straw poll on that and then see kind of where people are feeling and then kind of write the language for either one?
Yeah, I think that's what we do here.
Okay. All right. Who thinks we should use the structure under 2? That is best suited for us.
That's what it is.
Chip, Monique. Okay. And number 3. Luis. Katie. Again, Abba, I'm assuming you're 2, but I didn't see you raise your hand.
I was abstaining, actually. If there's a tie, then I'd go with 2.
Okay.
I was also abstaining.
You're abstaining?
Yes.
All right. Well, I mean, the other question here is like, is this worth a split vote, or are we gonna just align on one of these?
Let me back up. I can vote for 3 if the point is going to be that we are going to fully trust Christy to lead this. And for whatever reason, even if we were doing number 2, we wouldn't be holding the board member, I guess, accountable to actually chair the group. I wouldn't want to be under number 2 just because of semantics. Like if we're saying, oh, well, regardless of which one y'all pick, Christy's still gonna run the show, then I would rather fit it in number 3 so that we're actually being true to the language than put it under number 2 as kind of like a ruse, because I don't want to say, hey, this is a board appointed committee and my peer is running is the chair for a good cause and not necessarily running the committee, but he's the chair. And then for whatever reason, we're like, oh, but we all knew that Chrissy was really going to run the show. Like that's not what I am saying when I vote for number 2. I'm voting for number 2 saying, hey, he's the board chair, or he's the chair member. He's the chair of the committee appointed by the board to lead, but not necessarily make the decisions, but to lead. And if that's not what is going to actually happen, then I'd rather be transparent and say, okay, we're going to do it under number 3. It is a school-based committee. It's not a board-appointed special committee. And that's what we thought school reopening should be, is a school-based committee, not a board-appointed special committee, and we have to own that.
And then I'll just add to that, you know, I think maybe this is my disconnect is, and it can be exactly what Monique, Ryan, maybe the way you've envisioned it, but I think separate from that, maybe we should consider really having then a particular special committee that really is like the brain to the board in terms of what it really is. I mean, maybe we're past that now because, you know, the COVID is not, I mean, people are more familiar with COVID now, but maybe 4 months ago, we should have had this actual special committee to really advise the board about what COVID meant for education and all that kind of stuff. And I think to some extent, we may probably still should have something like that. So if we're called to task, we can say we actually have our brain built around it. We didn't just kick it to a school-based committee.
Yeah. Yeah. I would probably take that discussion up at a different time, but I see what you're saying. All right, so let's see. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 3. How is that? Oh, we don't have Jonathan. That's why.
And I'm changing my vote officially.
To 3. Okay. Drew, what, you were abstaining. Where are you landing?
I guess I'm leaning 3.
I can too, because I like Monique's final point, so I'm gonna roll with her on that one.
Okay. Abba, are you comfortable with that? Or are you gonna go with 2 and go split vote on this? Whatever you feel you need to do. You're muted. You're on mute, Abba.
The vision, the way I understand, or I think I'm understanding how you see this operating, to me, yeah, okay, maybe that's more of a 3, but I still think then we need a 2. So I would like to just put that out there for consideration in terms of having special knowledge given to the board in terms of the matters going forward versus just everything getting lumped into a school-based committee.
Okay. Well, I guess, yeah, I'm thinking through the communication of it because I do not think of this as a school-based committee. I think of this as a special committee led by the administrative team that is comprised of all of these other things, right? Because it's, I don't know. I mean, that's the whole point of the composition, I think, is that it is led by administration. And I don't know if maybe that was misleading. I know, Monique, your eyes are getting big because of the title in the thing.
Don't do this. That is the point.
Yeah.
That is the special committee. What you're seeing it as is a special committee, a board appointed special committee. The problem with it is that this chair word to you is somehow demeaning to the people that we know are going to really be doing the heavy lifting on it. And you want to make sure that they're recognized and elevated and actually doing. And I guess me as a person who chaired many committees, understanding that my role is not to know anything, is to listen and report out and just hold people accountable. I'm comfortable with that, but I would never want our folks like Christy and people who are actually doing the hard work to feel like, oh, well, because I don't have the title, I'm somehow lesser accountable, first of all, but also lesser appreciated for the hard work. And so I get it, but what you want here is a board appointed special committee, because you want the community to know that the board Christian these people to come out here and really look at this for us and report back to us so that we can vote on something. That's a board appointed special committee.
Well, so was the other one. We're creating it so that they can report out to us so that we can be knowledgeable. So, all right, we are.
All right.
And we can take this also to a governance meeting. Maybe the solution ultimately is collapsing the two and, you know, some tweaks there, something like that. To make it a little bit more flexible in both directions, so we don't have to spend a whole lot more time.
Yeah, if you would have just had there that the chair could be appointed by the board chair of the committee, we wouldn't even have had a whole hour conversation. If it would have just said chaired by someone designated by the board chair, we would have had this done 45 minutes ago. So.
I don't like doing it that way. So we still might have been doing this because you know.
The rest of it works. The rest of it works.
All right, so let me take a crack at this, and you know, we can edit as we need to. So I move that we create a
advisory committee
under section 3 of the bylaws. I don't know the other part. Kevin can zero us in. Under school-based committees, that we create a special committee with the executive director as a chair that is comprised of no less than 2 sitting board members, 2 parents, 2 staff members, and 2 medical professionals from the community to advise the board on school reopening plans as long as the committee endures. Edits, recommendations?
And you appoint Christy as the chair of said advisory committee, the executive director as the chair of such advisory.
I think I'm appointing the executive director as the chair of the special committee.
Advisory committee.
Yes.
Cool.
Other edits? All right, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Is Abba frozen?
No, I'm still abstaining.
Oh, okay. So, okay, all abstentions. Okay, Abba. Is that the right word? Abstention? Okay.
We're going with it.
All right. Motion carries. Kevin can do the math on that since he recorded it. Thank you all for that robust discussion. That's the kind of stuff that will make us better, and it's a little bit messy, and I appreciate you all speaking up and talking through it. That's really important. So thank you very, very much.
And Ryan, if I could add something, we did talk about issues like this at the last governance meeting, in that you know, we drafted the bylaws using best practices and comparisons from different, you know, similar organizations. But I think once we actually start putting it into practice, we'll see some similar terms that may be inconsistent with the way that we actually perform and function. And so I think, you know, in the upcoming year, we should take these opportunities to use it to iron out the bylaws and further improve it.
I agree. Yep, and you're right. The more we dig in now that we have these things, you know, we'll get more familiar with it, and we'll find, you know, areas where we want to revise it. So
can I just jump in here real quick though, just as a timeline thing to keep in mind. depending on where COVID goes, this could, the decisions that are recommendations made by this committee can move very quickly. I do think that it is possible, though I don't know if it's necessarily likely, that the CAB may make a decision to begin moving into a hybrid environment soon, which puts the committee in the position of having to choose between making a decision solo as Globe, or are we going to follow what DeKalb does? And so that decision point could come up between now and our next board meeting. And I just wanted to see, as this board meeting gets approved, how we want to think about that decision. Is that a board decision or a committee decision to make?
You have to call a special meeting for a vote.
Yeah, so we are, our board and our organization has the ability to do what DeKalb does or not do what DeKalb does. So we do retain that authority. And so, but I think, Drew, if you're asking about making a decision on hybrid or continuing to go virtual between now and the next board meeting because DeKalb does something that we need to react to, we would need to call a special board meeting and have a vote on that.
Okay, thanks. Just wanted to clarify.
But that's good. That is a good flag. I will say, based on my reading of what Christy presented, if there's 14 consecutive days of 100 or less plus 2 weeks planning, that's 4-week minimum, right? Before they would actually go back. And I'm assuming that in those 2 weeks of planning, if something goes back up, they're probably going to pause and not.
That was what they presented, but like we've seen with, or I've seen with many schools and districts all over the state, information is still changing quickly and people are going back on decisions they've made. So Drew is completely correct that it is moving quickly. There is pressure from both sides coming at school districts and independent schools very, very fast. Some based on science, some not. And so we've really, so the presentation that you're going to get will definitely have our due diligence. And that's why we invited those specialists, to be a part of this team so we can come with a comprehensive plan and approach and give you good information. That is our goal. Yeah.
And I just want to, sorry guys, I just want to say that like the decision is very detailed and very complicated and very hard for all of our board members. And so over the next couple of weeks, please just everything you can do to follow up on what DeKalb is doing. I know Christy's going to communicate out as much as she can because we may be in a position where we have to make a hard decision in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And I just want to make sure that we're all aware of that as a board and that we're prepared to make that decision.
Thank you, Drew. Yeah.
And we'll have comprehensive notes from our committee meetings that I will share out to the board so you can stay abreast as we meet. Our first meeting is tomorrow, and we are going to decide then also how often we're going to meet and what days we're going to meet, so you are aware, and I will make sure you have that information.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. Let's move on. And we do have to have the exec session tonight because there's just information in there that I don't want to wait 5 more weeks for, unfortunately. So we got to get through the whole agenda. All right. 2 pieces of new business that I also hope, they might warrant just as much robust discussion. I don't know, depending on how you all feel about the nominees. But our long-serving board member, Chip, has volunteered both to take over the facilities committee to give me a little bit of relief and work with Darren. And he has also volunteered to take the duties over as board secretary. So I'd like to first entertain any discussion on facilities committee chair. We've searched for quite a while to find somebody. The committee is kind of going a little bit into hibernation, and Chip is not currently chairing another committee, so it seemed appropriate, and we discussed it a couple of times. So I would like to make a motion to approve or nominate Chip as the facilities committee chair. And
I second the motion.
Discussion, any discussion on Chip's nomination? All right. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for that. So board secretary was vacated when Anita left the board. And again, Chip volunteered for the position. And so I'd like to entertain nomination for Chip as board secretary and discuss.
If there's no discussion, I nominate Chip for board secretary.
Any second?
Okay.
Second by Megan. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All abstaining? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chip, for volunteering.
You're welcome.
All right.
Chip.
Okay.
It's easy to get stuff done when you vote on it at 10.
Yeah, maybe that's why. Maybe that's why there was.
That's what I'm going with.
Okay, folks. Thank you. I do apologize that we still got to keep going here, but we do need to go into executive session for personnel matters. Can I get a motion to move to executive session?
I'll move that we move to executive session.
Second.
All right. I sent you all a link about 6:30 or so. So look for that Zoom link. If you did not get it, please text me, but you can go ahead and exit this meeting and go to Zoom, and then we'll come back.